steal things from there. So water. So we've got two speakers today, and rather than spend a lot of time introducing them both, I'm just going to give a quick introduction and let them take the time to share their expertise with us. The first speaker is Don Jensen, who's the superintendent of Highland Park's water treatment plant and also is a trustee in Beach Park, Illinois. And Don has, I don't know how long you've been superintendent in Highland Park, but a very long time, as long as I can remember. And he's oversaw the transition of our water treatment plant to new filtration technologies and has a tremendous amount of expertise in water treatment. And then after Don, we're going to hear from Steve Cole, who's the recently retired Vice President of Programs at the Great Lakes Protection Fund, and has done a lot to bring in new technologies, strategies, and financing to protect and enhance the health of the Great Lakes. So let's start with Don. Then we can probably do a few questions after Don, and then Steve, and then some questions after that. And then we will have community reports after the two of them speak.
All right. Thank you, Kim and Beth, for inviting me. And as Kim said, I manage the water treatment plant here in Highland Park. I've been in this position for 38 years and 5 years prior to that in water, and then 5 years prior to that in public health. So I'll give you an idea how many birthdays I've celebrated. I've got a small slideshow that I put together here to kind of guide this conversation. And I hope I haven't, don't overlap too much with Steve, we'll see. But I'll try to share that with you here. And I think, no, I'm not skilled at this sort of thing here. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, you just have to put it in presenter view.
Oh, there we go. Okay, here we go. Can you see that now?
We can. I just want to say one quick thing, Don, before you start. What we're looking to do is to provide everybody with some more information about how the water is treated and who's in charge of the standards and that sort of thing, what the emerging issues are, so that you can hopefully use that knowledge to take action locally. Okay, I will shut up.
That's okay. And Beth, you notice I fixed that slide for you. Okay. Just overview, pardon me if this is simplistic. So I have no idea what the different individuals' backgrounds are. Typical surface water treatment, which is what we provide water here from Lake Michigan to our communities that we serve. And so that's the classic surface treatment, which is still performed in many facilities such as Chicago and Milwaukee, is it comes out of the lake. It's coagulated, flocculated using, we used to use iron or aluminum sulfate, ferric sulfate, and perhaps a polymer to help settle the solids out. It's then filtered through some sort of material with the solids going off to waste somewhere, disinfected, of course, with typically chlorine, some use others, and then finally out to our customers. The contaminants that we have to deal with depends a lot on, of course, on the source water. You might have saltwater intrusion if you're in an area like in Florida where they have brackish water, minerals and metals. Certainly from impoundments, you're going to have agriculture runoff where you have algal blooms that can be a real problem for you. So it all depends on where you live and what your water source is. Here in Highland Park, this is a view of the front of our plant. We have, as Kim mentioned, we converted from conventional treatment where we did the coagulation, flocculation, and filtration with granular media, sand and gravel primarily. We converted in 2013 to ultrafiltration using membranes. And these membranes are tremendous pathogen barrier. If you'll see the cutaway here in the front, that fiber is smaller than the lead in a lead mechanical pencil, and the pores through which the water passes are about 0.2 of a micron in size. So it's tremendous filter for bacteria. All bacteria are larger than that. Most viruses, or some viruses, I should say, are larger than that. And of course, all of the pathogenic protozoa, such as Cryptosporidium and Giardia, are much larger than those pore sizes. We serve total of about 60,000 people, half of whom reside in Highland Park, and the other half are in Deerfield, Lincolnshire, Bannockburn, and Glenbrook Sanitary District adjacent, as well as military dependents on Fort Sheridan. So there's a little idea of how our water is distributed. And there's a plethora of issues that we deal with here. Some of which I'll skip over today. I think that Steve's going to cover. So I'll try and hit the ones that are that we have some influence on here in the water treatment industry. But these are all things that keep us on our toes in this business. Lead number one, you all heard of the course of the 2015 event in Flint, Michigan, where they changed from the Detroit water because it was becoming expensive. Detroit was their industry collapsed, so they were trying to make money off from water sales, I think, to the neighboring communities. So Flint reactivated their old river plant, but neglected to provide the corrosion inhibitor that Detroit had, and the river water was softer. So that destabilized the scale, and the pipes liberate a lot of metal that had been stored in those pipes over many decades, and the rest is history. What that's done to the rest of the industry is generate a lot of political and public concern, and generated a lot of new regulations that we're struggling to keep up with. The source of lead in most homes is the service line that connects the water main to the house, and there's virtually no lead in any of the distribution systems, certainly not in our source water. But we are now charged with seeing to it that this entire service line where lead exists is replaced, even the part that's on the homeowner's side, which is a financial challenge, a political, legal challenge that we have to face. Another one that we're seeing, of course, now is the PFAS. The ACS, American Chemical Society, identified literally millions of fluoridated compounds that fall into this category. A few years ago, Argonne Labs was conducting some research trying to identify those PFAS compounds that are more likely to be of public health significance, since there are just too many to test for. Right now, the federal law that recently went into effect will require remediation, I'm sorry, by 2029. In the meantime, we are required to test for them. We're starting this year. We have already done so over the past several years. We detected just fuzz above the detection limit of very sophisticated technology at 2.5 parts per trillion, with the threshold of detection 2.0. And that's well below, the 2.5 is well below the federal regulations that have just been proposed. Interestingly, the lifetime exposure that the feds are recommending is 40 parts. Oh, there's a typo. 40 parts per quadrillion. That's not measurable. There's no technology to measure that. So it puzzles me as to why they'd come up with a number like that. And that's lifetime exposure. Every glass of water you take, it doesn't make any sense. The technology to remove it is evolving. You'll read a lot of news articles about that. Granular activated carbon is the most likely one. If we ever did have to remove it here, that would be the technology we'd go to, I think. Ion exchange resin is another one, and reverse osmosis, which is very expensive and energy intensive. It takes a lot of energy to force water against the gradient. So that's something that's not likely that you're seeing. There are some lawsuits in the works. You might have heard about some class action suits that will help to pay, but it's going to be terribly expensive, and it's a forever treatment. Once you start this, and you got to dispose of the waste once you concentrate it, and that's going to be a challenge because no wastewater plant's going to want it. Of course, I mean, no landfill is going to want it. The water and wastewater industry, as well as storm sewers, are considered passive receivers. We have lobbied our elected officials for Superfund relief, because we don't have any control over what comes into this plant, nor does the sewer plant. Whatever goes down the sewer, they've got to deal with. So it's in the Superfund regulation, everyone who contributes to a Superfund contaminated site is on the hook for remediation, which would be a real challenge for taxpayers. Cryptosporidium, another animal in the lake. The Cryptosporidium infective form is called an oocyst. They're about 2 by 5 microns in size. And in 1993, there were over 400,000 estimated illnesses in Milwaukee. It's a nasty, nasty intestinal bug. They found out the first sign that they had a problem was when all the drugstores were out of antidiarrheal medicine, and there were a number of fatalities associated with that. So that was, to use the pun, that was a watershed moment in our industry. We have changed our treatment here. That was one of the drivers in converting to the ultrafiltration. Again, these are 2 by 5 microns. Our pore sizes and our fibers are 0.2 of a micron. So it's a great barrier against those organisms. Legionella, another one that is of recent concern. 1976 in Philadelphia, the Legion, American Legion, had a meeting there, and a number of them became ill and a number of them died. And we then became aware in public health of the Legionella organism. It's not typically a problem in water distribution systems because the residence time is generally not that long, and the water is typically cold. But once it gets into buildings, it can become a real problem. The water warms, and these things will proliferate and become a problem. And institutional, especially in where you have an immune compromised population, such as the Veterans Home in Quincy, you can have some issues. So we're sensitive to that. We recently did some screening of Legionella in our water system as a volunteer, as a research program that was done nationwide to try and identify the number of Legionella that's seen in municipal water distribution systems, and we found it not to be there. So they're below the threshold of detection. Disinfection byproducts, another issue that's a forever issue with us in this industry. Nobody wants carcinogens in their water, but no one wants pathogen, cholera and typhus and all those fun things either. So we are in a balancing act between ensuring biological safety of the water and minimizing the disinfection byproducts. Even ozone, which is one of the cleaner disinfectants, and also, by the way, takes a lot of energy. Even ozone is not immune. If there's bromine in the water, natural bromine, you will generate bromates, which are also they're suspected carcinogens. So those are regulated as well. Declining demand, you can see from my little chart here, we've over year after year, we see a 1 to 2% decline in demand. So that speaks to the success that the plumbing industry has had in reducing the amount of water that fixtures use, shower heads, toilets, dishwashers, laundry machines, and so forth. And the environmental ethic, where people are using less water, that they do this, they're escaping and so forth, don't water their lawn as much. So that's the good news. The dilemma for us here is that we have fixed costs. We have that renovation we just did cost the city approximately $30 million, and we bonded for that, and we have to pay those bonds off. And we have fixed costs, like myself, that are not related to the amount of water we produce. So we need to adjust rates up, increase the rates to cover all those fixed costs. So the less water you use, the more it costs you per 1,000 gallons. Aging infrastructure, this is throughout the industry, is a problem. We have pipes in the ground here that are 70, 80, 90 years old. And so there's an ongoing effort to continually replace those. And of course, when you change a pipe, you've got you have other buried utilities, and you are disturbing the pavement. So it's not just a pipe you're replacing, it's pavement as well. Lost water, this ties in, of course, with the aging infrastructure. Also metering, as meters age, they slow down, they never speed up, despite what some of our customers say when they call us. So the lost water is always a challenge. And of course, lost water is lost energy. Fluoridation, this is something that since the 1950s, when the John Birch Society objected to involuntary dosing medication, this is, and it's been an ongoing controversy, and we've seen it come up again with the recent changes in Washington. So we're watching that. We are charged by the state of Illinois, mandated by the state of Illinois, to feed fluoride at the 0.7 parts per million rate, which we of course do. And energy is huge, of course. Just to give you kind of an idea, the amount of electricity we use to produce water here in Highland Park is equivalent to about 546 average homes. We use a lot of electricity. We are constantly looking for means to improve our efficiency. But bottom line is it takes a certain amount of watts to move a certain amount of gallons. I don't care how efficient your motors are. You can shave a little bit here and there, but there's always going to be this cost involved. And we do, by the way, Highland Park does buy 100% renewable energy credit electricity. And in 2013, our city council enacted a water efficiency initiative, which it's ongoing. Of course, we have a 3-tier rate, which is contrary to the old rates used to be the more you bought, the less you pay for, a wholesale kind of concept. It's just the opposite here. And the logic being the more water that an individual or a company uses, the larger the pipes have to be, the more treatment capacity we need, and so forth. So that has an outsized impact on our infrastructure. We also implemented odd even sprinkling schedule to try and spread that out, and required smart sensors on new irrigation systems. I can't tell how many times I've driven into work and on a rainy day and past lawn sprinklers going. So that's important to us to see that. And of course, the public education plan goes hand in hand with that. And that's the end of my list. I hope I didn't run over time. I'm happy to take any questions if time permits.
Perfect timing. Thank you, Don. There were a couple of questions in the chat. Somebody asked how much water is lost to aging infrastructure, and someone else commented that a lot of it is lost to main breaks. So do you have any data on that sort of thing?
Not in the tip of my tongue. We take water out of Lake Michigan, and because in Illinois, all of our wastewater leaves the Great Lakes Basin, and goes into the Mississippi Basin. And this predates no one else permitted to do that, but because the allocation process, which is based on a treaty between the United States and Canada, the diversion at the Chicago River predates that. And so Illinois has an allocation of water that can be diverted. And we are recipients of an allocation for our residents and businesses here. And so as a condition of that, we're required to track, they call it non-revenue water these days, but the unaccounted for or lost water. And it's been a challenge for me here. We are seeing somewhere in the 20% range of non-revenue water, which seems like a lot. And I think a lot of that is there's a so-called real loss and apparent loss. And apparent loss is a metering paperwork loss. It's not real water that's actually lost. But it's a challenge to find that. It requires coordination between the metering department, the water distribution folks, and of course here at the treatment plant. We're in the process of working on replacing all of our master meters here at the plant. It's going to be a couple $1 million job, I'm afraid, but we got to build some vaults and things. But that'll help us to reduce that non-revenue water, that unaccounted for flow. And you had another question? Oh, the main breaks. Yeah, main breaks account for some, but we're pretty proactive. We try to stay on top of that. And of course, this time of year you have to be, because main breaks become ice rinks really quickly.
Yep. Okay, thank you to Chris Murphy, who's answering a lot of the questions in the chat. And I want to get to Steve, but one other question that just came in here was residents using rainwater for watering gardens and flushing toilets. So gray water is not allowed in Illinois. You can use it for watering plants, but not for flushing toilets, at least not you can't plumb your house that way, is my understanding. Is that?
Yeah, I know of no permission to do that. I know that's been used. Wastewater is used in irrigation on golf courses and places, but not inside a building.
Yeah, and it is allowed in other states, but it's prohibited in Illinois, unfortunately.
Kim, can I just pop in? There's a fabulous book called Purified that Go Green Reads highlighted recently. It's a really interesting account of how communities some of them are actually using wastewater for drinking water. And if that's of an interest, the book is kind of a page turner. Purified.
Okay, thank you.
Also, Kim, I want to make sure that we address Seema's question about PVC pipes.
Yeah, so Don, when pipes are replaced, the lead pipes we're replacing with copper or with PVC?
I believe in Highland Park, it's going to be, you're asking a question that probably belongs to a plumbing inspector, but to the best of my knowledge, it's going to be copper. In fact, there was
Yeah, that's
state regulation that was proposed to mandate copper, and I think that was at the behest of the plumbing union.
yeah, and that was the response that was in here. I'm pretty sure that's correct. I looked that up as well. Someone asked what the highest levels of PFAS are in Lake County. Is there a source that has that data?
There is, yeah, state of Illinois has a really great map of that. They, prior to the federal regulations, well, it's probably been 2-3 years ago, the state of Illinois actually surveyed every public water supply in the state and developed and has a map. And before this meeting's over, I'll try to find that and share it in the comments. Where you can, an interactive map where you can actually look at it. It doesn't necessarily have all the data. For instance, we did some voluntary sampling subsequent to that. We detected none during that survey. And we since, as I mentioned earlier, detected 2.5 parts per trillion, which is 0.5 part per trillion above the lab's ability to even detect it. So it's extremely low. And that's typically what we've seen in Lake Michigan. My guess, which don't hold me to it, is that probably migrated down from Great Lakes Naval Training Station in North Chicago, because for many years they've been teaching sailors how to fight fires on ships with, they called AFFF, aqueous firefighting foam, which is a PFAS compound. And it's that foam that you see on all the airport shows and all that. And so that I suspect that may have migrated down lake. The currents tend to be north to south here.
Yeah, and will probably be an issue in California pretty soon.
And Tim Sonder was able to find that map for you. It is now in the chat if you guys want to take a look at it later. The link's in the chat.
Okay, so Don, thank you so much. I know this was really technical, and I hope it's helpful for everybody to have that additional detail about water treatment. Now Steve is going to talk a little bit more. So Beth, if you can switch the highlighting. Okay.
I'm trusting you can see my screen.
Yes, we can. Nice
Okay,
picture.
perfect. Okay, thank you. Illinois River at LaSalle, just in case you're wondering where that shot was from. So thanks for inviting me to speak this afternoon. As Kim said, recently retired from the Great Lakes Protection Fund. I led investments in innovative programs to protect and restore the Great Lakes waters. So our work there spanned water systems, known and emerging water contaminants, agriculture, and invasive species. And so a lot of what I'm going to talk about this afternoon is based on my experience there, and also my experience prior to that at the Great Lakes Commission, where I was on the leadership team. And GLC represents the interests of the Great Lakes states and provinces, and I'll talk a little bit more about their cooperation during my remarks. Want to just voice appreciation for Don's presentation, which really illustrates how much he and his peers do to make sure that we have high quality water all day, every day, coming out of our taps on demand. It's vital work and not really well understood. So I think this was a really great foundation. So I always appreciate seeing that, great reminders in that deck. So today I'm going to talk a bit about how different levels of government work together to ensure that we have safe and sustainable water resources, and we're delivering those to the 12 million residents of the state of Illinois. I'll also touch on towards the end some of the challenges that we face in managing our water. Some of that will overlap, I think, with some of the things that Don has talked about, and a little bit about what we can expect from a new federal administration, which I think 6 days from now will be taking the reins. So we'll talk about that. Here's a framework. It's an abridged version, and I'm going to about the federal, state, and local agencies that help us manage water or do manage water across the state. I'm going to talk about some of these, but just briefly, a few that I'm not really going to talk about. U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, they manage the navigable waters of the U.S., which means the locks and dams and flood control structures. Great organization. They're the ones that are leading the construction of the new lock and dam near Joliet to prevent the spread of Asian carp up into the Great Lakes, while also maintaining a channel for commercial traffic. That's a massive project that's been 10 years in the planning and is just now starting to go into construction. USDA and the Illinois Department of Ag, they manage and implement programs that reduce the impact of agriculture on water quality. Best management practices for reducing nutrient loss, conservation programs, pesticide regulations, and so on. And they really, their impact on water is not entirely governed by, but is heavily influenced by the Farm Bill. For any of you that are involved in agriculture, you'll know that the Farm Bill was passed, it was signed into law last in 2018, and now we're on these continuing resolutions because it's very difficult for our friends in Congress to come to an agreement on what the next Farm Bill should be. There's a massive tug of war between conservation and productivity, and there's middle ground, but it's politics. So I'll just leave it at that. So let's talk about some of the big players here. The first one, perhaps obviously, is US EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. I'll dig down into some of this as I go further into my deck, but these guys are responsible for managing the overarching regulatory framework for water through two pieces of base legislation, Clean Water Act and the Safe Drinking Water Act. Clean Water Act focuses on discharges of water, and the Safe Drinking Water Act is really the act that governs the water quality that comes out of our taps. They provide baseline standards for both discharge and delivered water quality, and they provide enforcement mechanisms for ensuring that we're getting, essentially that agencies are performing to those standards. They do watershed protection programs, non-point source programs, so runoff often from agriculture, but not exclusively from agriculture. And then a very important program, which is up for reauthorization this year, which is the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, which has been responsible for the restoration of brownfields and areas of concern around the Great Lakes for the last 15 years. Great program, and that's run from the EPA office in Chicago. EPA does emergency response. They also manage federal funding programs for water. I'm going to spend a little bit more time talking about money because that's often where the power lies. So federal water infrastructure funding, this is not an exhaustive list, but I think these are the ones that people really gravitate to most. First, state revolving funds. Now, sounds arcane, but let me just drill into this a little bit. Congress appropriates and distributes money to each state to fund their state revolving fund. And each state has two funds, one for drinking water investments and one for clean water investments. These funds make loans to water systems, and the water systems will repay those loans over time. They're below interest loans and they're long-term loans, and they're managed by the state. So each state has some latitude on how those loans are made, and I'll come back to that in a moment. The revolving part of this, you notice the title is State Revolving Fund, is that when water systems repay their loans to the state, those funds can then be relent out to other systems. So it is literally a revolving money machine, if you will, that's intent on driving low-cost loans to water systems to reinvest in the significant infrastructure gap that we have, not just in the state, but as a country. The second financing area that's interesting is something called WIFIA. these are direct loans from the federal government to water systems. In fiscal 2024, just to give you a sense of scale, $7.5 billion was funded into WIFIA. These are long-term low interest loans to help communities implement critical water infrastructure projects. There's specific funding that's been made available for lead service line replacement now. It doesn't even come close to covering all the needs for lead service line replacement, but it is a resource now for communities to fund some of that work. You'll recall in 2021 there was a very big deal made about something called the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. We call it the bill. I think it was also called the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act or something like that, but everyone refers to it as the bill. This had in it $50 billion of investment in water infrastructure. Of that, the drinking water state revolving funds collectively received $12 billion to their core, $15 billion for lead service line replacement, and another $9 billion for emerging contaminant work. Another $13 billion went to the clean water state revolving funds across the states. That included another $1 billion for emerging contaminants. So you can see how as those numbers are breaking down, where the Congress believed the investments needed to be made or where the support needed to be applied for our water infrastructure over the coming years. In Illinois, over the last 3 years, the state has invested over $1 billion from this law in water infrastructure projects, and most of that has come through the state revolving funds and the directed funds that I mentioned a moment ago. So that's what's happening kind of at the federal level for funding and the basic responsibilities of the US EPA. We go down to the state. Now, a moment ago, I said that the US EPA sets standards for drinking water quality, and that's true. But each state, Illinois specifically in this case, has the authority to set its own drinking water quality standards, provided they meet or exceed federal requirements. And so the responsibility actually for the implementation of the regulations from US EPA are actually housed in Springfield at Illinois EPA. That will be important in a moment. I'll be coming back to that. One of the other things that happens at state level is that they issue permits for wastewater discharges under the Clean Water Act, and that sets standards for all discharges from point sources into water bodies in the United States. They could be from municipal, industrial, stormwater discharges, and so on. And there are about 7,000 of those permits in Illinois today. And so the state EPA is responsible for monitoring those 7,000 permits, making sure that each of those discharges are falling within the limits of their permits. Illinois EPA monitors public water systems through compliance and testing. They enforce the standards for surface and groundwater. And they manage the revolving fund I was talking to you about a moment ago for water and wastewater infrastructure. Now, here's what's again important. While in the same way that the state is able to set its own water quality standards so long as they meet or exceed the federal requirements, for the state revolving funds, which is really the state's use of this federal money, they're able to write they have required to write what's called an intended use plan, an IUP. There are a lot of acronyms in government, as you all know. So the IUP for their SRF must meet the US EPA guidelines, but can be tailored to meet the state's specific needs. And in particularly, that IUP includes the scoring mechanism that tells Illinois EPA who gets priority for the limited funds. It's a lot of money, but it's still limited funds for the applications to get loans from the revolving fund. It's a very imperfect process, and there are prerequisites for an application. and those prerequisites can be barriers for smaller systems and particularly disadvantaged communities to make those applications. So as a result, unfortunately, most of the loans, both in terms of number and in terms of dollars, tend to go to the larger, well-funded systems. The Biden administration, in putting together the bipartisan infrastructure law and the regulations behind it, established targets for disadvantaged communities that they should be receiving up to 49% of those SRF loans as grants, that is, forgiven loans, rather than just having to compete essentially on a level playing field with all of the larger systems. The administration also set up a number of assistance centers for utilities to help them prepare for and apply for SRF loans. I apologize if that was a lot of detail. And the reason for this, I hope, will become clear as we talk about some of what we might expect when a new administration takes over next week. Also, the state of Illinois is the Department of Natural Resources. A couple of interesting things here, and I think somebody mentioned the Great Lakes Compact earlier. So yes, the amount of water that we can receive as a community from Lake Michigan is governed by the Great Lakes Compact, which was signed by the Great Lakes states in 2008, and it essentially memorialized a series of successive agreements between the states, I'd say, and disagreements between the states since the Chicago River was reversed in the early 20th century. Basically, the agreement governs and establishes how we manage the water. Fundamentally, number one, Great Lakes water stays in the Great Lakes watershed. And number two, there's no new uses of Great Lakes water outside the watershed, with some minor exceptions, which we probably won't deal with today. And Don mentioned this, and I think it's, again, I'll just touch on it. In 1967, there was a Supreme Court's consent decree between Wisconsin, Michigan, New York, and Illinois. And the states were challenging Illinois about the amount of water that we Illinois were taking from the Great Lakes. The consent decree says now that Illinois can withdraw 2 billion gallons a day from the Great Lakes, which may seem like a lot, but we're using most of that already. And that's how Highland Park, for example, gets their allocation. It's an allocation of that 2 billion gallons. Illinois DNR is responsible for managing that allocation. IDNR is also manages the Groundwater Protection Act, and for many of the communities that are on this call who are using groundwater know how important it is to protect the watersheds around groundwater. And so this is a key responsibility of IDNR as well. They do some other conservation-oriented activities that you would expect, like managing soil erosion, wetland protection, habitat protection, and so on. The last thing I'll mention on this point is the State Water Survey. I spent some time just in preparing for this, actually, on the State Water Survey site. There are some fascinating maps in their mapping section about where the water is coming from, what the watersheds of Illinois, and so on. But they're fundamentally responsible for collecting and analyzing data on surface and groundwater resources, and they monitor the groundwater levels and quality statewide. All very important for those of you that are not drawing your water directly from Lake Michigan or buying it from a system who does. So county health departments, just briefly, because they play an essential role, but not one I'm going to delve into much. For those of you on wells, they're doing the private well permitting and inspection. They manage septic systems, or the oversight essentially of septic systems, and water quality monitoring from both private and public sources. And they issue public health advisories. If any one of the awful critters that Don was talking about earlier were to show up in a water supply, you would be hearing from the county health department. That's their responsibility. Then at the municipal water level, Don's done a great job of covering this. They're the ones that are day-to-day managing and monitoring the source water and the finished water delivered for drinking water. Worth noting that in Illinois, there are over 1,700 community water systems. That is, water systems that are serving a permanent set of customers. That's a lot. I wouldn't say any more than that, but I think that's many. And there are also 800 publicly owned water treatment plants for wastewater as well. As you heard from Don, they're doing infrastructure maintenance, they're setting the rates, they're doing water conservation programs, and Highland Park, as many others who draw from Lake Michigan, are reselling some finished water to other systems. I live in Glenview. Our water comes from Wilmette, so there's a relationship between the Glenview Department of Water and Wilmette, and we buy from them. So, so that's how all the pieces fit together. I think then the next question, I suppose, is, so what's coming up next? So here are a few things to think about in terms of our challenges. Aging infrastructure. In the major cities around our region, some of the infrastructure is 100 years old or more. Certainly a lot of it, both in terms of the distribution system, that is the pipes that you don't see, and the plants that you do, many of those are at least 50 years old. In the next decade in Illinois, we believe that about $20 billion is going to be needed for repairs and replacement of infrastructure within our state. Lead service lines, as has been talked about already, are a big replacement burden on each of the municipalities. There's some relief from the federal government there, but that's still going to be a burden. I think, as I pointed out, another challenge is that small communities struggle to apply for and receive financial support that would help them address some of the issues that are on this list. Excuse me. So what can we do? What should we do? I think as communities, we need to support investments in infrastructure replacement. I'll just leave it at that. We have to do that because otherwise we'll be chasing our tails and just chasing water main breaks every day where we haven't replaced when we should have. An important thing that we tried to do at the Protection Fund when I was there, and particularly as we were enabling some communities to get access to federal funding, is to not just replace the infrastructure that they have like for like, but actually to think about what they really needed. As Don said in Highland Park, their demand for water is going down. In other communities, their demand is going up. But in both cases, new technology is becoming available to maybe do things better than we've done in the past. So the water treatment plant of the past, Don's first slide, is different from the water treatment plant that Highland Park's operating today. Other systems should be thinking about investing that way in new infrastructure. We also need to support communities' water financing efforts. There's a network now of businesses, organizations that are helping smaller communities get access to federal funds. I'm going to pass on the acronyms that I put at the bottom of that page, but EFCs, SRF navigators, and so on. I can provide information for anyone who's interested in on some of those programs that might be helpful. Second, a changing climate. Increasing intensity of rainfall events, as we've all seen, is straining our stormwater resources, stormwater systems. We've got increased flooding risks along our rivers and in urban areas. The flood maps of 50 years ago don't reflect where flooding is happening today. Funnily enough, at the same time, droughts are also affecting water availability. So that's a double-edged sword. What we can do, and I expect many people on this call are already doing this, finding ways, small and large, to invest in green infrastructure. And natural infrastructure is definitely going to be more effective than building more more hardened channels in catching rainfall where it falls and having it infiltrate rather than trying to pipe it to a treatment plant and discharge it into one of the rivers. Stormwater standards in terms of detention standards. A lot of municipalities are now doing this, but there's still opportunities to do more here to establish better standards for detention, particularly on new construction. As I've heard people say to me, and I'll repeat to all of you, we shouldn't assume that we can beat nature. We have to work with the natural systems, not against them. And on the long run, nature's always going to win. So as soon as we can, or the more we can engage nature to help us deal with our stormwater challenges, the better off we're going to be. In water availability, some aquifers in our region, particularly in the western suburbs, are showing significant declines. Lake Michigan water is going to be an opportunity for some, but as I've already talked about, there are some constraints in both the Great Lakes Compact and the Chicago Diversion Consent Decree that limit the amount of water that we can allocate from the Great Lakes to the region. Some of you may have noticed Joliet recently made an agreement with Chicago for Chicago to provide them with water, I think, towards the end of this decade. That's the type of thing that fits within the allocation, and it's partly a good use of Chicago's capacity as well as providing a solution to Joliet's groundwater problem. But there are always going to be limits to how many of those types of arrangements can be made. So what can we do? Perhaps obviously, and I know most utilities are already doing this, water conservation measures, supporting reuse initiatives where we can, and certainly recycling to the extent it's available to us, and monitor for other new water-intensive commercial development. I was on the call earlier today with the Alliance for the ELPC. They were talking about the changes to the administration and the effects on the Great Lakes. They were talking about what I think we all need to be aware of too, which is the number of data centers that have been proposed to be built around our region. Data centers are hugely water intensive, and we have to be vigilant about that, I think, and where necessary, advocate against new data center development, because it will have a significant impact on our water resources. Food processing is another one, which you see cropping up from time to time. And chip manufacturing. I haven't seen a proposal to do chip manufacturing within the Great Lakes Basin or within Illinois recently. But again, that's far and away one of the highest impacts on water use. So we have to be alert for that.
I don't want to cut you short, but
yes, I recognize.
Soon, so we can have some time for questions and answers.
Yeah. Okay. Just a couple more. So I can probably just skip over this, but practically, because we've talked about much of this, water quality and emerging contaminants. The one important takeaway from this is the state has discretion on on the standards they set for us for our delivered water and that water quality, and we really need to make sure that we support the state in doing that. So finally, what's coming up? So if you've heard any of the rhetoric from the campaign over the last year, what we know is coming is funding cuts, reductions in agency staffing, probably cuts to the water infrastructure programs, both financing and direct programs, and potentially standards rollbacks for the Clean Water Act. So we should be aware that those are on the Project 2025 agenda. We maybe can talk in the Q&A about some of the things that we might need to do about that. What we should be doing is advocating for high water quality standards in the state, maintaining our focus on lead service lines, and supporting SRF rules that prioritize small systems. I apologize for running along. Thank you for your time. and I'm sure we'd be happy to chat about questions. I saw a lot of stuff coming through in the chat, so
Thank you. There's a lot of questions, but this was great information. And it gives me some hope to see that the all things having to do with water treatment are so decentralized and are, while there may be too many governmental agencies, especially in Illinois, I have hope that Illinois and multiple agencies are going to have their hands on things before they get scrapped by the federal government. So thank you for giving us that overview. So lots of questions. Let me start with Seema's question about detecting micro and nanoplastics and filtering them out. Is that something that's being done? Is that something that's being contemplated? And I don't know if
Don, you
that's
may want to talk about this.
Sure, yeah. At present, I know of there's no standard method for that. There's so many different plastics and different sizes and sources, and there's really nobody knows what the health issues are. I recently read that they've been detected in brains at autopsy, but nobody knows what that means. Certainly they're in the environment, they're getting into the food chain. We're inhaling them every time you do laundry. You're putting them into the air when you dry your clothes from your fibers from your clothes, unless you use all cotton. So it's at this point it's evolving. There's a lot of research. I don't remember what university I participated in a program at one of the Michigan universities that has a program where they're looking into it, but there's more to come, I'm sure. I don't know how one would manage it. We're lucky here in that our membrane filtration system filters down to 0.2 of a micron. So the microplastics we are filtering out. Nanoplastics, maybe not. I don't know what the nano size range is, but I suspect we're getting most of them with our filtration process.
You know, there's a program at Wayne State, Don, that you may be talking about, which was
right.
Yes, no, okay,
Wayne, yeah. I that's the one. I couldn't remember the name of the university. I volunteered and did a couple of focus group sessions with them. Right, Wayne State.
Thanks. Good. We funded that, so that's encouraging to hear you were involved. But what they're trying to do is essentially to catalog all the different types of nanoplastics that they're finding in rivers and streams, and they have some pretty sophisticated technology for doing that. However, the problem that we're not going to solve the problem at the back end. We really need to solve it at the front end, which is creating extended responsibility for producers. So producers are actually responsible for the cleanup of the products that they create. That's an emerging trend, if you will, amongst at least academics on how we deal with this problem.
And unless we all go to cotton clothing, though, we're always going to have our artificial fibers, and it's going to get into the laundry systems, and it's going to get into wastewater, and they're not designed to take it out. Biological process in the waste system, not necessarily. And by the way, I mentioned in one of the comments, bottled water. I recently read that there are something like 2 million fibers in your bottled water, plastic fibers. So that's not going to solve your problem either. Maybe that'll force people back to using good old fashioned tap water.
So I'm not, that was the next question. I'm not going to ask that question. You've answered it. Any simple advice for regular people to know their water quality and get help when needed?
Yeah, and if you don't mind, Steve, I'll take that one too.
Please, yeah, go.
We're required by law to produce an annual consumer confidence report, which is basically a similar to the label you get on your bottle of soda pop at the store, and it identifies any regulated contaminants that we have detected in the past year and soon to be the past 6 months. There's a law that's been delayed in implementation that requires us to issue that twice a year. And it's either emailed or we put it in our city newsletter as an insert annually, and it's on our website, so it's always available. And it's by law, we don't list the thousands of things that you can test for. We only list the things that are detected. Otherwise, people be overwhelmed; they get lost in the mess. So it's there. And also, if we have any violations, if we exceed any regulatory limits for any of the regulated substances, we must notify you promptly. And so there will be any violations that occur here, and happily we work real hard to avoid them. But if should one occur, we must issue immediate public notice there's a prescribed format and language for that. So if you don't have that, you can be pretty confident that your public water supply that's being provided to you is safe.
For Steve, are there things that advocacy groups should be doing to make sure that IDNR is on top of their monitoring, especially for lower income folks? Are there specific groups working on that?
For water quality monitoring, I think probably that responsibility sits with the EPA, not with DNR. But and I think working with your state rep would probably be the right place to go if you're concerned that EPA is not measuring water quality in your municipality. I would start with your state rep.
And then one other question from Beth here. This was my big question, as Don knows recently. If the federal government reduces water standards, what can communities do? Can we maintain the previous higher standards? And I asked Highland Park to put in place sort of a floor for water treatment recently. And we were told that we could not do that because we're preempted by the state and we have to follow the state guidelines. I don't know if Steve or Don, if you want to say anything more about that.
Well, I think that's right, and that's kind of the point I was trying to make earlier too. That while federal EPA sets a floor, that doesn't mean that the state is limited to that. So federal EPA said, "Oh, we're just going to wipe out all the Safe Drinking Water Act requirements." The state could still establish and maintain a set of standards that are higher than that.
So it sounds like we need to be advocating to the state level legislators to make sure that our water treatment standards remain high.
Yeah. The advantage we have this time versus 2016 is that not only here, but in many of the Great Lakes states around us, we have Democratic administrations and Democratic AGs. So we have a better chance of maintaining that than perhaps we did in 2016 had the same administration shift happened.
Yeah, there's no limit as to the quality of the treatment we provide, but in the instance that you're referring to, the fluoridation, yeah, that's a state law. But if we want to make, if you want to put an RO system and provide distilled water to your customers, you could do that, and the state wouldn't object to it. But any additives that we put in, it must be permitted by them.
Yeah, right.
Okay. And then one last question. The filtration, the Highland Park's filtration system, is the pore size that we have in that system normal? Is that, do other water treatment plants have that sort of filtration, the microfiltration?
Yeah, that's kind of it's not rapidly being adopted. It as you know, it's very expensive to implement. So a lot of utilities haven't adopted it. But there's a spectrum of a particle size reduction. The sand and gravel filters that we've previously employed were very effective, and they're not a sieving process. I won't go into van der Waals forces and all the technical physics, but which I don't understand well. But that's an attractive process, and whereas we're actually doing a sieving process. The pore size that we're using is pretty typical for the industry. That's called a microfiltration or nanofiltration is right in that neighborhood. We're right on the cusp of micro versus nano. So 0.2 micron is kind of typical for that size. And the pores, if you looked at that one picture, you'll notice the fibers are actually, it's not like a screen. It's more like a band of insulation where it's a labyrinthine path that the particles have to follow, and they just don't make it through. So it's effectively 0.2 micron pore size.
Great, thank you. And then I know I said was the last question, but I'm going to have one more question because Beth posted this one. Should individuals be using home water filters? I have an opinion, but I'm curious to hear yours.
Mine is hell no. No, damn it. That's what I do. No.
That's what I told Beth.
If you want to remove the fluoride that we add, by all means. If you want to remove the chlorine that we add, by all means. And some home filters take it, they're RO. You might have another counter RO. And so you're removing minerals as well. And I mean, if certain cases, if you are immune compromised or you have some other medical issues, yeah, we don't provide sterile water. We cannot. We do not. And people need to understand that. So if someone is severely immune compromised, yeah, you might want to do a home filter. But just keep in mind that you are removing those things that we are required to add. And you may want to add, if you had kids, you might want to do fluoridation for the cavity prevention, dental treatment. But it's for the general population, no, you don't want home filter. If you do put one in, the other caveat is you must maintain it properly, because you can actually concentrate and release in pulses the contaminants that you're trying to take out once you saturate the thing. So it's important that you follow the manufacturer's protocol for servicing it.
And you also may want to look into what actually is in your water by checking those annual reports, so that if you do put in a filter, you're filtering out what you want to be filtering out. There's different types of filters that filter out different things.
Exactly. And Consumer Reports, I haven't recently looked at it, but years ago they did a great job of rating different filters for different constituents that they remove and to what levels. And also NSF also rates them for that. And yeah, when these things say removes 99% of lead, what does that mean? What's your starting point? It's meaningless. If you're starting at a ridiculously high number, yeah, but if it's typical of a municipal water system, it might be absolutely meaningless to you.
And please don't use something like a Brita filter that you have to throw out every month or so and then replace. It's just really super wasteful. So I want to thank both Don and Steve for joining us today and sharing so much great information. We really, really appreciate it. We are going to switch gears, and what we do at all of our meetings is share information and ideas among all of our groups. You're welcome to stay on. You're welcome to take off if you've got other things to do. If anyone would like to report, please put your community name into the chat so that we have a list. Beth, you're on mute. You got to unmute.
Sorry. I think you also said it works well if they add the little shaky hand.
Oh yeah, if you want to just use the raise hand feature, that actually is probably easier.
Yeah.
Then I sift through the chat.
And you pop up to the top, it's easy to call on you. We all would like to hear what your communities are doing, especially if it's something that someone is going to be able to replicate, partner with you on, or help you with. So, again, we're going to be ending at 2:30 at the latest. So we only have a couple minutes per each group, but we'd love to hear if you've got something you'd like to report.
And I'm going to preface what I'm about to say with, we don't want this to be the calendar. The calendar is on the website. So go to the website and post your calendar things. That being said, there's a lot of things on the calendar right now that have recently been posted. So do take a look at gogreenillinois.org so you can see that. And that includes a program about the Hefty Orange Bag program tomorrow at the Highland Park Library at 6. And there's also a program next Wednesday, the 22nd at 7 on digital detox. And I'm just bringing that up because that's kind of a new and different topic that I don't think we've heard about before, but these data centers that were mentioned that use so much water and so much energy, part of that use is to store all the garbage that you have on your computer that you haven't deleted. So that's something we don't often think about. There's an indoor farmers market in Highland Park now on Saturdays from 10 to 2. I don't know that there's any other indoor farmers markets in the suburbs at the moment. Evanston has had one in the past. I don't know if that's happening this year or not. Digital detox programs at the Highland Park Library. So Katie, you had some information to share. You're on mute. Okay, Evanston has an indoor farmers market every other week. Well, Highland Park has it every week now, so Evanston's gonna have to step up their game. You're still on mute, Katie.
So while she's trying to, Got it?
Yep.
No, that was me. I apologize. Thanks. So Des Plaines is going for replacement of lead pipes, and I have 2 calls into Public Works to ask what materials they are putting in. I have not gotten a call back. So I wrote in our monthly column in the Des Plaines Journal for residents to find out and to ask their our mayor what kind of pipes are going to be replaced. Also, we've been having lots of work days in the Forest Preserve District at Isaac Walton, getting rid of invasive species. We're having a seed sowing event tomorrow night at the Des Plaines Public Library. We are working on our Sustainability Fest May 7th at the Des Plaines Theater, and our topic this year is Nature Heals. We're very excited about that, and also about the Wild Things Conference with you all on May 1st or March 1st.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
Anyone else who wants to report, please raise your hand. And I believe, KT, that the pipes need to be replaced with copper. I think that's the state law. I had looked that up, and then Don confirmed that as well, that that was what was happening in Highland Park. Phil, do you want to, I see you just posted something about insurance. Do you want to speak and ask that question? And Seema, you've got your hand up, so go ahead, Seema.
Not so much an update on Go Green Vernon Hills, but to let you know that the Lake County's solid waste plan update was up for a vote at the Lake County Board meeting today. There was a recommendation in the plan to allow chemical recycling facilities that use technology to convert plastics to plastics in Lake County. Myself and Jenny Futterman, we were part of the committee that provided input to the plan, and we asked that that be removed from the plan and we don't allow such facilities because they're very polluting. They haven't proven to be scalable or effective, and they bring a lot of hazardous waste with it. I was at the Lake County Board meeting today also to provide comment, and there was an amendment that was put in by one of the members. Both Jenny and I have been pretty active in reaching out to the members about our concerns, and so it looks like the amendment to remove the language passed today. I just need to confirm that it removes both the problematic technologies from coming to Lake County. So I just wanted to give a quick update to that. And that's it.
Okay. Thank you. And I hope Lake County Board was receptive because someone called me yesterday to ask about that. And I said, whatever Seema says, you should listen to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
Phil.
can just mention, yeah, we're planning a recycling extravaganza and we want to do it on village property, and they are requiring us to have liability insurance. So I'm just wondering if anyone's done something similar and had insurance, whether they got a company they can recommend. We're a little afraid of the cost structure, but let's see. If anyone's got some good leads on insurance companies who do that with nonprofits, be great to hear from you.
Go Green Wilmette got a policy years ago because we did that huge environmental fair, and we ended up keeping it for all of our activities year round. I don't know the name of the company, but our treasurer can let you know. If you could email me, that would be great. Beth Drucker.
Yeah, thank you, Beth.
Anybody else?
Can I just mention a few things, Kim? And again, we would love to hear from all of you. It's super important. If you're working with faith communities, I see someone is talking about the North Shore Unitarian Church. It is a great thing for faith communities to be working together on sustainability issues. Some of them are really doing great work and others haven't yet started that chapter. In Wilmette, we're working specifically with Catholic churches. And this is very interesting because the Pope has decreed through Laudato Si that all the Catholic people on the planet should be addressing sustainability issues, but that edict has not come down to the actual churches and schools the way it should. Also, if you are interested in electrification, EV products, heat pumps, there are Rewiring America and Electrify Now have fabulous webinars and resources on their websites. Go Green or Meta has found that there are so many great resources out there that part of what we're doing is just, rather than doing program after program ourselves, we're just directing people to the things that are already being done. ICEA has some great solar programs. So you don't have to do it all yourself. We're directing people up to the digital detox program, which is excellent in Highland Park. If you can record your programs and let people watch them either hybrid or at their convenience, that really increases your reach. So I just wanted to encourage you all. Also, if your group has not reviewed what you accomplished last year, it's a great exercise, and hopefully you'll all be pleased to see how long that list is. And if you haven't set goals for 2025, now is a really good chance to do that. Downers Grove, Greener Grove did a wonderful job of that. I get their newsletter, so I have a chance to see what their goals are. All of your groups might want to be doing the same thing. Thank you.
Jim.
Yes, so I'm from the North Shore Unitarian Church, and I just put it in the chat that, our group we're remediating a playground area that used to have the hazardous rubber mulch type stuff, with the toxic chemicals in it. All that mulch was removed, and we're now looking for about 22 cubic yards of topsoil and compost. And we want to put in a pollinator garden for monarchs. In fact, our youth group last Sunday went out to the front of the church where we have our prairie garden, and they actually were spreading wildflower seeds on a very cold January Sunday, so that they could properly, do the stratification on the seeds. So anybody could help. I heard somebody had funding. We could sure use some help to get this soil involved. Thanks.
Excellent. North Shore Unitarian Church does amazing things. And that, if you haven't seen that garden on 22, it's worth going by to see what that looks like. Oh, yes. Beth just put in the chat, monitor your community's plans for playfields. I don't think that you from Lake Forest is on today, but they put in a plastic grass field that Green Minds, Lake Forest, Lake Bluff fought for quite a while. And it is right on the river. It's smaller than it would have otherwise been, but one way to keep PFAS out of the water is not to replace actual turf grass or other gardens with plastic grass. We also, I believe, have a plastic grass field that either went in or is going in on the river in Highland Park that the Highland Park District put in over near Clavey Road. Does anyone else have a report? Okay, we got two more. Jeffrey.
Yeah, Buffalo Grove, a couple of quick things. First is back to the Wild Things Conference. I'm going to be hosting a presentation about our 35 years of stewardship at Buffalo Grove Prairie, which is a small remnant prairie. It's a little gem, largely unknown, but it will be one of many, many sessions at Wild Things on March 1st. I just learned that Lake County SMC has awarded Village of Buffalo Grove funding for additional treatment of Phragmites. We have several monocultures of Phragmites, and we've been piloting control and revegetation of some of those areas, and we just got a nice bounce from SMC to help accelerate that at one of our large sites. To your point about recapping your accomplishments during the year, last week we had a celebration for our group, Buffalo Grove Environmental Action Team, at our local historical museum. There was an exhibition about our history, and my remarks included a recap of 16 events that we sponsored or hosted during 2024. It was very impressive. I didn't realize we'd been that active or done that much. So it was a really good exercise, and it helped us to also to focus on things that we want to either improve, add, or drop during 2025. So it's not only a good memory and celebration exercise. It's a good foundation for planning for the next year. Thank you.
Thanks. Anne, you had your hand up.
Yeah, just quickly, Go Green Greater LaGrange added another G to our name. So now we're Go Green of Greater LaGrange, because we incorporated officially at our last board meeting, Western Springs. And one of our first tasks is to study the commissions that exist at LaGrange Park and LaGrange sustainability commissions, and then take that information to Western Springs with the idea that perhaps we could convince them that they should have a similar organization as part of their board. And then secondly, about fighting artificial turf, one of our members successfully fought the installation of artificial turf in LaGrange parks with a really well-written document, which we'd be happy to share with those who are facing that issue right now elsewhere.
Great, thank you. If that's a document that I can share on the Go Green Illinois website, please email it.
Okay, will do.
If that's okay with you. We're trying to compile some resources there, and we've got some things from Green Minds as well. Anybody else? Oh, Bruce. I don't know if Bruce is still on. He said he posted there.
Yes, I made it. Okay, I just did post that in Downers Grove, there's been some real success over the last year or so in connecting with village council officials. And as a result, one of the 4 specific aims of the village is a sustainability goal. And I just have been very pleased about the influence. And in fact, the village also hired a full-time sustainability officer that goes right along with it. So informally, I'm really pleased to see the influence that the group has been able to have with the village government. And that's it.
Okay, thank you.
Kim, can I pipe up again? It's
Yes.
Beth Zucker.
Yep.
I think it was Chris Murphy asked what would we do with a list of paid sustainability staff members, either on the municipal level or at schools and park districts. One of the most convincing things that any community can get as an argument to why you want to hire sustainability staff is if the other communities around them have already done so. And so what we're trying to do is to get a list that we can show to our communities to say, hey, look at, you've got 12 communities around us in Northwest Chicagoland that already have hired staff. We think it's time for our community to do the same thing. Same thing with school districts. School districts are a little, if anything, a little bit behind communities and park districts for sustainability. And if we can show that we have more and more school districts that are investing in sustainability staff, then it's an easier ask when we go to our own school districts. So we're trying to get that information so that we have a stronger argument as to why to hire them. Center for Green Schools is doing this nationwide, and we're trying to figure out how many of their members actually are in the Chicagoland area.
Okay. Anybody else? Last chance.
Okay, Kim, here, I just want to announce that the leaders on the off months when there's not a program with speakers, we have a smaller kind of brown bag lunch meeting with just the leaders. That is going to be Tuesday, the 11th of February at 1 p.m. That's just for 1 hour. So most of you leaders, if you are a new leader, please let us know.
And our next regular meeting is March 11th. And that's 1 o'clock as well, and that will be over Zoom. All the meetings are over Zoom at the moment because we've expanded our geographic range so incredibly during COVID, that, you know, to get to Botanic Gardens from somebody who's in LaGrange or Downers Grove takes longer. So thank you to everybody for being here. Thank you to our speakers again. If you would, so I see Cindy's putting her email in for leader emails. We'll make sure that you're on that list. If you are not on our regular email list, if you got the email from somebody else, the invitation from somebody else, feel free to sign up on the website, which is gogreenillinois.org. There's a sign up form on the right-hand side of the homepage. If there's anybody else from your group, or anybody who's interested in starting a group, Go Green Beach Park perhaps, feel free to sign them up or get them to sign up as well. Any other parting words, Beth?
No, sounds like a lot of us need to follow what Chris Murphy's been doing. Looks like they've been doing some other work. Part of the reason why we have this group is to make sure that we're not duplicating efforts. And so thank you for all the work you're doing and for allowing other groups to copy you, co-promote your events. And it's pretty exciting to have this network continuing to grow. If you know someone in a community that does not have a Go Green group, convince them to give it a try to start it up, or send them to Kim and me, and we'll try to convince them to do the same.
Okay. Thank you all. Do you want to stop the recording, Beth? And the recording will be up on the website within the next week or so.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hang
Bye,
on.
everyone.
Thank you.